Hello, and welcome to today's Augustana Human Library session. The title of today's human book is From Victim to Survivor, and this is the book's abstract. At the age of 19, I found myself in an abusive relationship where I was physically, mentally, and sexually abused more times than I can ever count. It was not until 5 years later, when I was seconds from losing my life, that I knew it was time to leave. However, leaving my abuser left me homeless, broke, and a single mother of a 2-year-old with disabilities. This book is about my journey of redefining expectations and becoming my own statistic in this society. Thank you all for being here, and welcome from victim to survivor.
Thank you, Nancy. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Lauren Olivia Easter, and my story is titled Victim to Survivor because I spent all of my adolescent life and most of my adult life believing I was worthless, ugly, undeserving, and actually believed my life had no meaning or purpose. My story began when I was 19. I'm 30 now, but my story began I was 19 and I moved to Arizona to start over because by this age I had already endured sexual violence and needed to find myself once again. I immediately enrolled in school to study nursing and I got a job working in retail. I was a huge tomboy at that age and I was really used to being overlooked by people that I encountered. Shortly after I moved, I met a guy, and in all honesty, this guy wasn't anything special, but he treated me well when we first met. He took me to nice dinners, bought me gifts, and our relationship moved quite quickly. However, I knew from the beginning that I would never love this man. I believed that I was not capable of loving because of the assaults I experienced at a young age, and I have never loved before. And about 4 months into our relationship, we moved in together. I remember it was the first week after we moved in. After we started living together, I was working and I received a text that there was going to be a surprise for me when I got home. And of course I was excited. And when I arrived, all of my clothes and my shoes were gone and replaced with dresses and heels and jewelry. And he responded saying that he likes his women girly. And for some reason, that wasn't a red flag for me. It even got to the point where he would be like picking out my outfits, and for some reason, I didn't think too much of it. It was about 6 months into our relationship. That was the first time he got physical with me. He was drunk, and I came home late from school. And he threw me up against the wall, accusing me of cheating on him. I brushed it off and blamed it on his alcohol consumption until it happened again. Only the next time and the next time, it went from throwing me up against the wall to hitting me in the face, to throwing me on the ground, to kicking me in the stomach. The physical abuse became this daily occurrence, and we weren't even together for a year. The abuse got so aggressive and it got so elevated that I was forced to basically drop out of school. I would either be too weak to go to school or my parents would draw questions that I didn't want to have to deal with. So I ended up dropping out of school. And then the physical abuse went on, and he just didn't even want me to attend college so that I would have more time for him. After a year together, I decided to secretly enroll back into online classes, and I figured that I could work on my schoolwork while he was at work, and kind of do this secretly. And I remember one night, however, he came home early and saw that I was on my laptop and asked what I was doing. I lied and I said nothing, just on Facebook, but he took my laptop anyways and looked at my search history and saw I was working on D2L, the platform the college used, and took that laptop and smacked it across my head before he tossed it off our balcony. He then proceeded to take me into our bedroom, and that was the first night he raped me. And that was the first time that I was sexually assaulted by this man. And that night after he raped me, I tried to leave. I knew I couldn't stay here. And as I was fighting to get out of this apartment, you know, he had a gun and he took out his gun and he said that was gonna be the only way that I would ever leave him. He would continuously threaten my family and my loved ones. And I believe that if he was capable of treating a woman that he claims to love like this, then what is to stop him from hurting those around me? The abuse carried on. I was being sexually abused daily. I'd be waking up with him forcing himself inside of me and being physically assaulted and verbally degraded. One evening, I remember he was pissed and he locked himself in the bedroom, and I decided to proceed by forcing myself in, and that's when I found him doing cocaine. I was livid and I lost my mind that money was being spent on drugs. And he came at me and I began to run, but as I was trying to run away, he grabbed me by my hair and slammed my head on the dresser and said he wouldn't let me up until I did a line of coke. And I just screamed and I begged, I just begged for him to let me go, but he continued to hold my head down and would punch me in the ribs until I eventually just gave in and I did a line of cocaine, the first time I ever did drugs. And slowly but surely, the only way that I was able to lessen the abuse that was happening to me was to participate in doing drugs with him. And my addiction to cocaine came thick and fast. Our addictions got so bad that we could barely afford necessities anymore, but the abuse was not as frequent. And that was more important to me until one day our dealer and his friends came to collect their money. My abuser owed a lot of money that I was not aware of. He proceeded to say he didn't have it and asked how we could work it out. And I just remember the dealer making a joke, pointing at me and making a joke like, that's how you can work it out. And my abuser I'm quoting him, said, "Have at it." And my mouth just dropped and I just couldn't even believe, like, this is how I'm being perceived right now. And that was the day that I was gang raped by 3 men. And sadly, I can't say that was the only time it happened. 2 years into the relationship, after this has been happening, I found out I was pregnant. I was 21 at the time. And I didn't tell anybody. I just immediately went to have an abortion. And when I got to the clinic, I just could not bring myself to do it. I am 100% pro-choice, but for some reason, I couldn't do it. I had no idea whose baby it was, but I decided to keep the baby anyways. And pregnancy for me was such an amazing time because I was able to quit cocaine cold turkey. I had no hesitation. And I was never abused or assaulted when I was pregnant. And I just wanted to be pregnant forever because then I knew I was safe. However, after several doctor's appointments and figuring out that the day I conceived resulted that the baby belonged to my abuser. I became very depressed and started realizing that I was going to be stuck to this man forever. I remember I was 7 months pregnant and I found his gun and I put that gun to my head and I pulled that trigger. And it was at that moment that I truly knew that there was a God, because that gun was empty, which was never the case. So I took that as a second chance, and I made a plan to do whatever I could to save myself and save my son, who was on the way at the time. So I had my son, and the abuse started right back up again after I wasn't pregnant anymore. But I decided to endure it and do everything I could to somehow get a better life for us. I saved whatever money I could, and I was talking to people about making a plan. And after 2 years of this, when my son was 2 years old, it was the morning of November 29th of 2019, and I was 24, that I tried to leave. It was about 7:30 in the morning, and I was caught by my abuser trying to leave, and he attacked me. He proceeded to rape me, and when he finished, he flipped me over and threw himself on top of me and strangled me until I blacked out, saying he was going to kill me. I remember just staring at our 2-year-old son, who was standing in the corner screaming and crying, and all I could do was whisper to him that everything was going to be okay before I blacked out. Witnesses heard the commotion and pulled my abuser off of me, and he took off. My son and I went to the police, and I filed a report, and I had a rape kit completed and had all my clothes and photos of my injuries submitted into evidence. Thankfully, he was eventually arrested, and I was able to break my lease with no damages because I was granted an order of protection. However, it resulted in me now being homeless, jobless. I was broke, and now a single mother of a 2-year-old. And my son is autistic, so he had special needs at the time. I was in and out of shelters. I was sleeping in my car with my son. I had to stay at friends' places while I'm trying to prepare for this trial against my abuser. I remember pulling my credit report and found I had $30,000 of debt because he decided to open cards in my name that now I was responsible for. I just wanted to give up. And during this preparation, we're preparing for this trial, the terms domestic violence and victim were being tossed and thrown back and forth, and I didn't know what this meant. I began researching, and I discovered that 1 in 5 women will experience physical and sexual violence. I learned that this number is even higher for women of color. And I learned that I'm going to be more likely to go back into an abusive relationship, that I was more likely to become addicted to drugs again. And I just didn't know this was my outcome. This is what I had to expect. And it was really disheartening to learn that this is a scenario for a lot of individuals. And I remember shortly before trial, I get a call from my attorney, my victim advocate, and she informed me that my evidence in my case went missing. And the photos of my injuries were the crux of the case. They demonstrated the abuse that I endured that day. And for some reason, they either weren't stored properly or they were deleted. Nobody seemed to have an answer as to what happened to these photos, but they were gone. And the prosecutor decided that she did not feel comfortable moving forward with trial. And so my abuser got off easy. And it was at that moment I was determined to never let this happen to anyone who wanted to seek justice against their abuser. After that, I began focusing solely on myself and my son. I moved to Tucson to start over and pursue higher education. I went through a lot of counseling. I was on antidepressants, and I used other mechanisms to try and begin healing, but nothing was working. And I came to realize that I was grieving because the woman I once was dead. And I had to learn to be this new individual, to be a single mother, and to try to embrace school again. And it was really difficult for me. And the only way I was able to move on was to find a connection between the woman I once was and the woman I'm trying to be now. And the only connection in my mind was domestic violence. The woman I once was basically died from it, and I am now trying to overcome. So I started telling my story to my pillow and then to my mirror, and eventually I got the courage to tell it to audiences. And I have utilized my story as a weapon to bring awareness to domestic violence, because it truly can happen to anyone. Domestic violence is 100% non-discriminatory. It doesn't care what color you are, it doesn't care what gender you identify with, what your sexuality is, what social class you live in, or what economic status you hold. Through my years of advocacy, I have seen domestic violence happen in all demographics. So while continuing with my advocacy and healing, I was able to graduate from Pima Community College with 3 associate degrees, including my Associates of Paralegal Studies. And I was able to use that degree to get a full-time job working as a paralegal. But I also received several awards, including including a full ride to any university I wanted in Arizona. And I utilized that full ride scholarship to go to the University of Arizona, and I double majored in law and philosophy. I was very passionate about studying law, and this is what I'm still passionate about today. I ended up graduating just this past May with a 4.0 and with honors. And during my time, I did receive many scholarships, and I did receive 2 prestigious awards from the university. But I have utilized all those platforms as a way to share my story. I had to be silent for those 5 years I was with my abuser, and being silent was the worst thing I could do. And reading the statistics, this happens to so many people that it would be wrong of me to be silent about what has happened to me. I share my story because awareness needs to happen. I share my story because people need to listen. And I share my story because I want to join this fight of ending violence against women. And through my journey and my education and my advocacy and helping, I have, and healing myself and trying to overcome, which to this day is a day-to-day struggle. And this is 6 years later. You know, I've learned to see myself as beautiful and intelligent and worthy, and embrace that word survivor, because being a survivor is truly my greatest strength. And with this journey, I was able to raise a beautiful son who is 7, and I was able to meet the man of my dreams, the love of my life, who treats me the way I deserve, and who has given me the opportunity to finally say those words, I love you, and experience what love is all about. And my future goals are to pursue higher education. I'm going to be doing a dual master's degree in law and economics and in human rights. I am striving to be an advocate attorney because, as I said, I don't ever want to let this happen to another person again. Every person who endures domestic violence, sexual assault, or any form of gender-based violence deserves to have their case treated properly, and it should never be overlooked the way mine was. I don't put blame on the judicial system, but it should not have happened. And so I've made it my mission to go to law school eventually and I will become an advocate attorney and hopefully a human rights lawyer, because gender violence is a worldwide crisis and it needs to be addressed. I just hope that my story has helped educate, and I hope it will continue to bring awareness. And I hope anyone who hears it can take something. And I have used it now with all my advocacy. I have volunteered with several domestic violence organizations here in Pima County. And I've been actually approached to join the national coalition as well here in the US. And I have promised myself I'm never going to be silent. I was silent for too long. And it's important that people know that domestic violence can truly happen to anyone, anywhere, and it comes in all different forms. It's not always physical, it's not always sexual, it can be economic, it can be verbal. And sometimes it's due to a lot of reasons. The worst thing that probably happened to me during that time was the isolation I experienced. And every survivor will tell you different, but for me, it was the isolation. My family turned their back on me, friends turned their back on me because they asked that question, why didn't you just leave? And that answer is different for everyone. Every survivor I have encountered has been asked that question. And it's different for everybody. It could be because of kids, because you really love the person, religious reasons, cultural norms. There's so many reasons why people don't leave. Me, it was fear. And the fact that I was so scared and so naive at first is what's most disheartening for me, because I always just thought I was better than that and I wouldn't fall into that. But now I have just learned to use my story as something that I can pull strength from, and how I can educate others and hopefully help others, because with the statistic of how many women and men and other individuals endure any type of domestic or gender-based violence, I'm sure almost anybody knows somebody, or it's happening to somebody close to you, or it's happened to you personally. So I made it my mission to bring awareness, continue to tell my story, continue to educate, and hopefully I can help others get out of these situations or support them through it the best way I can. And I am open to any questions. Please feel free, I'm an open book. But I really do appreciate you all listening, and thank you so much for all of your time.
Does anybody have any questions for Lauren? That's a lot to hear.
I know. It's summarizing the last 10 years of my life. So, I mean, it's just questions and other things you want to hear more on. I'm more than happy to share.
How old is your son now?
He is 7 now. And it's just, oh, yes.
Sorry to interrupt if if you're saying something.
Oh, no.
You can wait.
No, please ask.
Oh, thank you for sharing all that. I was wondering how you explain to your son who his father is, or how you plan to do that if you haven't yet, because he's still pretty young.
Yes, that's a question I've been asking myself, and been actually having talks with my partner with most frequently, like lately. So my son, I wasn't very successful in both the criminal process, and when the family court happened, they still granted visitation. So to this day, I still have to encounter my abuser frequently, and my son has a relationship with him. And we've had those talks about how we're going to explain this, and I have made it clear that I'm not going to talk badly or be the reason to destroy a relationship, but I'm still not going to be silent or lie about what happened. So it's still something I'm working on, how we're going to approach that when the day comes. So I honestly don't know at this time. I'm kind of taking it step by step. I still get counseling, and my son, after what he had to witness, he was in a lot of counseling and play therapy. And, we had to work on him having that relationship with his father. And slowly but surely, I'm hoping to get guidance on how we can best approach that situation, since I am heavily involved in advocacy. So once I get some answers, I'll be able to answer that a little bit better. Oh, thank you very much, Kitty.
Katie's also asking if there's a shelter for abuse victims in Tucson.
Yes, so I actually volunteer with, it's called Emerge, and they're a domestic violence center for those who are enduring. They offer so many services. I mostly help with their lay legal, helping participants get orders of protection, supporting them through hearings or trials, since that's my area that I'm most passionate about. But they also offer a shelter. However, Tucson, just here in Tucson, the Tucson Police Department experiences about 15,000 domestic violence calls annually. And the shelter, they can only really give to those who are in the most highly lethal situations. And it's really disheartening when you're on those calls and a person is in crisis mode and they don't meet the requirements to go. And all you can do is help them create a safe plan and get to a safe place. And it's hard because there aren't enough resources to get people out of situations all the time. But they do try to offer some type of financial planning, kid therapy, counseling for them, support at court. They even have a men's group for, since primarily here, men typically tend to be the abusers in the situation. They have a men's group for those who are trying to not do that anymore and to kind of get out of that habit. And I thought that was really important as well. But yes, there is one here, Maricopa County, where Phoenix is. They also have their own center as well. I was in Maricopa when mine happened. I utilized a lot of those shelters. And then there's a lot of religious organizations that have women's shelters and as well around the area. But Emerge is the biggest one here in Pima County.
There's one question that just came to me in the chat. Did you ever have to seek medical help? And if so, was there ever an advocate in that environment? And did you have any advocates basically throughout time, not just specifically if you had to seek assistance?
Yes, so there were a few times I did seek medical attention, but at the time I lied about what really happened. I've experienced broken bones, concussions, and I, would get things wrapped up and they'd ask what happened, but I always lied. And doctors, for me at least, they went along with it. They never really asked more questions about what happened. I didn't get a victim's advocate until I finally filed my first police report. And that was when, because of the severity of my case, they assigned one to me. And she's the one who inspired me to pursue becoming an advocate attorney. If it wasn't for her, I would not be where I am today. She really inspired me and was there for me every step of the way. And that support it's just so important to truly get out of this situation. And many people who endure domestic violence, they are in isolation and don't have that support. So it's really important. So I'm really thankful that she was able to help me, and I'm hoping to be able to do that for others and continue to do that for others too.
And Peggy Sue has in the chat, thank you so much for sharing your story and the wonderful work you are advocating. I'm so happy that you not only survived, but you've been empowered. Oh,
thank you so much, Peggy. Yes, and that was so important, is to help empower others and encourage others to listen. It's truly important that the awareness keeps continuing and the talks keep continuing, because that's the only way action is going to happen. So I appreciate you saying that. It means a lot to me.
Well, we have a small group, and I think actually everybody here has asked a question in one form or another. So I certainly would like to thank you for sharing your story. I'm sorry, how do you say sorry? That you've had to endure all of that. It's a lot of pain and suffering to somebody who clearly hasn't done anything to deserve it. And I think it's amazing and wonderful that you've turned everything into the expressions of advocacy and support of others. You're truly a survivor, that's for sure.
Thank you.
And I mean, it's exciting that your goal to get into law in this area is, it's unfortunate that it's needed, I guess. I kind of think of the human library that way. It'll be great when we don't have a need for the human library because people aren't living through prejudice and discrimination and having these kind of life experiences.
Right.
So I would love it if there was no reason to have a human library anymore, but I imagine that you will offer great support to people who really need it, and congratulations on having the character and integrity and strength and everything to pursue that.
Oh, thank you. It means so much to me.